Alright, let's start looking at some equations. So the first thing about polar rows is you're going to need to be able to graph depending on the equation. So example number 1, we got r equals 6 cosine of 3 theta. So right away, because theta has a coefficient of 3, we know it's going to be a polar rose. So let's figure out some things. First thing we need to figure out is what's going to be the length of the petal. Now the length is just going to be the coefficient of cosine. In this case, the length is going to be 6. Now the next thing you need to figure out is what is the starting angle for the first petal. So because we're starting at because our equation is cosine, the starting angle is going to be at 0 degrees. So we're going to start at 0 degrees. Now the next thing we need to figure out is how many petals are there. And again, you look at the coefficient of theta. Because the coefficient of theta is odd, that coefficient is just going to be the number of petals. So we're going to have 3 petals, and the angle between each petal is going to be 360 degrees divided by how many petals there are. In this case, 360 degrees divided by 3, that's going to give me 120 degrees, which is going to be the spread for each petal. Now from here, I'm just going to start plotting points. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a dot to represent each petal. Now my first petal is going to start on the 0 degree mark with the length of 60. So from 0, I'm going to go out to 6, or length 6, I'm sorry. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's a length of 6 at the 0 degree mark. So let me double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So here is my first petal here. My first petal is a length of 6 at the 0 degree mark. Now 120 degrees is going to be the distance from one petal to the next petal. So what I'm going to do is, starting at the 0 degree mark, I'm going to add 120 to get to my next petal. So starting at 0 degrees, I'm going to add 120, which is going to put me at 120 with a length of 6 again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. My next petal is going to be another 120 degrees from this 120 degree start. So 120 plus another 120 gives me 240, again with a length of 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 120 again should get me back to the original petal. So far here's the skeleton of my polar rose. We're going to have 3 petals with a spread of 120 degrees at a start of 0 degrees. Now once I have these marks to represent my petals, all I'm going to do is I'm going to just draw my leaf in. Now unfortunately, because we're sketching this by hand and not plotting points, we're not exactly sure how fat each petal is going to be, but this is good enough for us to be able to get an idea just by hand what this polar rose is going to look like. So starting from each dot that I plotted, I'm just going to make the petals. Again, I don't know necessarily how fat or how skinny each petal is unless I create a table and start graphing. Alright, example number 2. We're going to do exactly the same thing. Let's figure out the length. So the length is going to be 4. Now, your start is going to be a little bit different because we're dealing with sine here. Sine's a lot harder to graph. To figure out where you're going to start, sine doesn't start on the 0 degree mark. Sine is going to start at 90 degrees divided by b. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 90 degrees divided by my b value. My b value here is 4 because b is the coefficient of theta. So 90 divided by 4 is going to give me a decimal, 22.5 degrees, which means that my first petal is going to start at the 22.5 degree mark. Next thing I need to figure out is how many petals. Again, look at your b value. My b value here is 4. Now 4 is an even number. So what that means is the number of petals isn't going to be 4, it's going to be 2 times 4. So I'm going to have 2 times b, which is 2 times 4. In other words, I'm going to have 8 petals. And the angle between each petal is going to be 360 degrees divided by how many petals you have. In this case, 8. So 360 divided by 8, we're going to have 45 degrees between each petal. So let's start plotting. Length of 4, we're going to start at 22.5. And this is just going to be a guesstimation. So 22.5 is somewhere between 15 and 30. So let's say somewhere here at a length of 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And from there, we're going to go 45 degrees to the next petal. So I'm just going to use my calculator and start adding. So we're starting at 22.5 degrees. My next petal is going to be at 45 degrees, which my next petal is going to now be at 67.5. So 67.5 is somewhere between 60 and 75. Again, with a length of 4. I'm going to add 45 again to get my next petal. So now we're at 112.5. So here is 112.5. Add 45 again. Now we're at 157. So 157. Add 45 again. Now we're at 202. So here is 202. Add 45 again. We're now at 247. So here is 247. Oops, a little bit off there. Here's 247. Add 45 again. We're at 292. So 292 is right here. Add 45 again. We're now at 337. There's 337. So we have all of our points plotted. Now all we have to do is just start making our petals. And you should take a quick double check to make sure you have 8 petals total. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 petals. Now let's just make our petals, going from the pole to each point. Now again, I don't know exactly how fat each petal is going to be, but there's going to be my polar rose.